So in this segment, we're going to talk about EU leaders set out hopes for post-Brexit relations with Britain. So EU leaders have signalled the desire to reset relations with the EU after 7 turbulent years on from the seismic Brexit vote. Representatives from all 27 EU states said on Monday they wanted to, quote, develop further ties between the EU and the UK, end quote, after a deal sealed on the Brexit trade arrangements for Northern Ireland. So they're talking about the Windsor Framework there. A little more than 2 months after the Windsor Framework was agreed, Sunak and the European Commission chief von der Leyen, they stressed the value of being, quote, valuable partners with each other, end quote. It does show you that despite Brexit, we don't have to be on bad terms with the EU. There are limits to have it, to how entangled we can be with them as a third country, in certain areas definitely, but we are actively competing with them. Mainly stuff on economics, but outside of that, there are areas of cooperation mentioned later on. We can choose to be cooperative or antagonistic towards the EU. That's down to us. We saw antagonism under Truss and Johnson. Now we're seeing the pendulum swing a bit the other way under Rishi Sunak, which is interesting because Sunak, out of the 3 prime ministers we had recently, he's the one that he claimed he voted Brexit and he supported it from the jump, whereas Truss didn't, and Johnson didn't either. He only pretended to, by the looks of things. In an article written for The Guardian to mark Europe Day on Tuesday, ambassadors and high commissioners of all EU member states say, quote, rediscovery of common interests and concerns have thus led to the Windsor Framework and to a much welcomed necessary regain in trust in EU-UK relations. The task ahead is therefore to build on this re-engagement and to deliver further the ties between the UK and the EU. A strong UK and strong EU are valuable partners for each other. To our mutual advantage, we have the solid relationship between our societies, our business and academic communities, and the need to ensure they continue engaging with and enriching each other in manually profitable and respectful manner, end quote. And Brexiteers kept saying the EU are trying to punish us with, things like the border checks on goods, the travel checks when you go abroad, and the Northern Ireland Protocol. But these were just consequences of our own actions. The EU would not want us to go into terminal decline because we are still a decent trading partner. But not as important as we were before, but still okay. If the EU wanted to punish us, they would just increase the checks on our exports and making the queues in Dover look like a short wait, the current ones that we have. They don't have to be kind to us, but they won't really, they don't want us to become like a Belarus type country, but a lot of that is out of their hands anyways. And even then, who would we be a vassal state of at that point, since Belarus looks like it's a vassal state of Russia? Like, those kind of things don't make sense. But, I don't think the EU want to punish us that much. I think it's kind of like Germany post-World War One, where the UK really didn't want to, damage Germany that much because it saw it as a valuable trading partner, amongst other things. I think that might be how the EU sees the UK. Like, we're worth having a free trade agreement with, amongst other things. And obviously Northern Ireland, the impact kind of Northern Ireland has on Ireland regarding trade and the Good Friday Agreement. It will always have to, hope that the UK stays on a decent level because of the fact that that area, Northern Ireland, is so it's a tinderbox. Anything can set it off. I'd say the EU want to keep us at arm's length would be the description I would say. Sees us as an ally, but also as a competitor, but not in the category of, say, Turkey or China. I'd say like a much lesser version of the US. Not a rival, but a competitor. The article is not specific about the ties that they're talking about, but talks about future security and foreign policy arrangements could be high on the list of new partnership talks after the EU leaders praised the leading role the UK has played in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And on that conflict, we've actually done well, apart from our failure with refugees, but that's what we normally fail on. Anyways, I think helping Ukraine, we've done a lot of good. But, the EU did sanction Russian oligarchs a lot quicker than we did. And that would have been one of the areas that we could have cooperated the EU with, but we chose not to. I wonder why. The EU has databases that monitor potential threats, and having, kind of cross-border agreements make sense. Will help deal with things like people smugglers and other international criminals. It's quite difficult for us to deal with people smugglers at the moment, but I think one of the key fundamental problems is most of the ones that are involved in this actually live in the United Kingdom, so it's the Tories not dealing with it. But the ones who may live in France and things like that, like, you need cross-border support to help. The British police have bemoaned the lack of access to EU databases around security and criminals. I don't know how far we can push it given we're a third country, but if we can get better access than we have now, that's still a win. A deal on science and satellite communications is already on the cards, with talks reopening recently on the UK's participation of Horizon Europe, the EU's £83.3 billion science and research programme. I wonder, the satellite thing, is that about Galileo? I wonder if Galileo's back on the table. I don't know. Sunak is trying to nickel and dime the Horizon re-entry, despite scientists telling him we need Horizon. Top scientists and researchers that have the ability to leave the UK due to their nationalities have left or are really considering it. It does not make much sense to do this. And the ones that might require visas to leave, I think they're seriously thinking about it as well. Fundamental issues such as the re-entry into the single market or the customs union will not be up for discussion, as this would reopen the Brexit deal. And it's frustrating because I've read two Guardian articles in as many days, kind of saying, oh, we're not talking about, why aren't we talking about rejoining the single market or whatever, constantly bringing up. And I don't know why the Guardian and their writers keep talking about this. We cannot rejoin the single market unless we join EFTA or the EU as a full member. Why do they not understand this? Getting an amendment to the EEA agreement is ridiculously hard. It's much more difficult than trying to rejoin the EU proper, honestly. It'd be ridiculously hard to do it, and I don't know why they keep pushing it. Maybe I need to debate someone at The Guardian and let them know what's up. The letter comes less than a year after relations broke down between the UK and the EU when the then Prime Minister, Liz Truss, tabled the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which threatened to unilaterally tear up parts of the withdrawal agreement. It does show you how quickly things can change. Like, the Windsor Framework does not really change much in relation to the kind of the Northern Ireland Protocol versus the Northern Ireland Protocol, but it does signal that the UK are committed to the Good Friday Agreement and other agreements like the Northern Ireland Protocol. Really, showing goodwill in international politics can bring you a long way. We can get back into Horizon, get other bilateral deals that are now on the table potentially, and this is within the space of a few months. I think Sunak's only been Prime Minister since October. Like I said, there are limits on us as a third country, but this is better than the direction we were going in. Better than before, constantly threatening a trade war that we would have got battered in. It would have been a one-sided trade war. I've covered it before. If you want me to cover it again, let me know why we would get battered in a trade war. But honestly, it's ridiculous. It's like trying to punch Prime Mike Tyson in the face. You'd get flatlined. An influential House of Lords committee recently urged the government to start working with the EU capitals to remove Brexit barriers that block musicians, young people and professionals from working easily in Europe. It's ironic that the EU actually offered something on musicians, and then Lord Frost said no, and then Lord Frost come out later, like after he resigned from cabinet, and said, oh, we should have got a deal on musicians. Like, bro, that was your job. I've never seen a guy, right, do a job so badly and then come out and say, oh yeah, this has gone wrong, who's responsible for this? Bro, it was you. The UK's Europe Minister Leo Doherty told the EU European Affairs Committee that it was frequently the first topic of discussion in his visits to EU capitals. It's difficult on the visas and things like that because you won't be dealing with the EU as a bloc. You'll be dealing with member states on things like musicians and visas for young people. I think only on professional qualifications could you get a deal with the whole EU. I think a few musicians and young people, it depends on each member state's requirements. Musicians most definitely. Young people, I'm not 100% sure. It's tricky but doable. But what are you going to give us in return? That's the question. EU leaders chose Europe Day because of a resonance they see between the joint effort to protect Europe from Russia and the day in 1950 when Robert Schuman, the foreign minister of France, probably not how you pronounce Schuman actually, looking at it because he's French, proposed the creation of an economic union to bind countries in the post-war era. The ambassador notes that, quote, the EU has become a bulwark of democracy and promotes security, economic development, human rights and fundamental freedoms throughout the world. End quote, objectives that are shared by the UK. And, I would not say that both sides are super altruistic, but given some of the major major players out there are worse countries, but the UK and EU member states, clearly my cat disagrees with some of the stuff I'm saying here, but the UK and EU member states, still have a lot to do regarding human rights and other things, or at least, we can do a lot better. The UK just passed the anti-protest bill, and the bill that basically gives people traffickers more power, because once trafficked victims get to the UK, they won't be able to go to the police because they will get deported. The victims will be treated as criminals. It's tragic. They said, quote, nowhere is this more evident in our common response to the outbreak of the war on Europe, the European continent, end quote. They added that would be to their letter. In relation to the cross-border travel for schools, Charles Hay, chair of the Lord's European Affairs Committee, said it behoved the liberal democracies of Europe to unite despite Brexit, saying, quote, "We think we can do better and we must do better. We have the mechanisms to do better," end quote. I've never seen a guy use the word better so many times there. Again, and it will be difficult to do better, it would require a lot of changes at the Home Office. Maybe they can reduce the cost of visas or make it so kids coming for short stays won't need visas, but I don't know how that would work, given that the kids being impacted by these rules are ones without EU passports. So, their parents are maybe residents of an EU member state or something like that. The kids don't have EU passports, so what that means is they need visas to come here, and the Home Office are really bad about that kind of stuff, and they're expensive. I don't know how it would work, but it looks like the UK and the EU are working with each other to keep our bond alive, given that we're not too different, kind of EU member states in the UK, we're not too different, or at least, I guess at least we're not that authoritarian yet. We're still heading in decline, though. That's my fear. I don't know how kind of deep the UK will go into that kind of hole. Maybe the EU thinks that by keeping us in their orbit, we won't go into, become a fascist state, or, as I would call it, the worst timeline. Not the worst timeline, because it can go a lot worse than this, but into the bad timeline, I guess. And I'm not sure. I'm not so sure, how far the UK can decline here. But I'm happier by this article. It gives me some hope, at least, that the UK and the EU are kind of heading towards a closer relationship, rather than us being super antagonistic. Like, the UK are putting up better signals than we were before, and we might actually get some better agreements than we have now, especially with the TCA being up for parts of the TCA being up for a negotiation. So not the whole thing, obviously. We're not that lucky, and things like hope are on low supply at the moment. So yeah, need a bit of that. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.